First, there was gunfire, the sound of a police officer shooting Jacob Blake 7 times in the back, leaving him paralyzed. That led to marches, protests, and chants demanding justice, an end to police shootings of black men, plus a plea from a loving sister.
I am my brother's keeper. And when you say the name Jacob Blake, make sure you say father, make sure you say cousin, make sure you say son, make sure you say uncle, but most importantly, make sure you say human.
But the horror was amplified by a deadly vigilante shooting. 2 people gunned down, a 3rd wounded. Prosecutors say the 17-year-old suspect is a vigilante who crossed state lines to go on the hunt. America is facing a reckoning here and now. Where do we go from here on this special edition of Culture Conversations? Welcome to this special edition of Fox LA's Culture Conversations. I'm Mimi Brown. This show is live because we cannot ignore the recent events in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the impact that the police shooting of Jacob Blake is having on our country. With me to discuss all of this is Dominique Duprima, host of Front Page on KGLH Radio. Also with us is DJ Head of Real 92.3. Thank you both for joining me on Culture Conversations.
Thanks for having us, Mimi.
Thanks for having us.
So I have to ask, what was your first thought when you heard yet another black man have been shot by police at point blank range with his children in the car? Dominique, I'll start with you.
Well, you know, I am not desensitized to this. So for me, each one is a fresh heartbreak. I feel like the Jacob Blake story as a mom is even more gripping because he was shot in front of his children. So even though he did not die, he's paralyzed, his life will be changed forever. And I think about the trauma of those children, ages 3, 5, and 8, 3 little boys who will grow up with permanent trauma and who will grow up with another generation afraid of and angry with, and rightfully so, police.
Absolutely. And Head?
My first thought was, again, you know, and it's kind of sad that I, unfortunately, unlike Dominique, I am desensitized to it in the sense that I live it every day. And so it's kind of like, I almost want to say it's normalized. And I guess that's a pretty sad thing to say as a black man. Right. But from what I was seeing on the video when I watched it, I was like, I can't believe that this is happening in broad daylight again and over and over and over again. And it just seems that we almost as a country have not stopped and yet talked about what we need to do as far as agenda-wise that needs to happen so we can stop this. Because like she said, his children were in the car, so they're gonna have to live with that trauma for the rest of their life as well.
That's so true. And you know, according to his father, he is now handcuffed to his hospital bed. That just seems overly cruel. Where is he going, Dominique? Head, can you hear me?
Not able to hear your audio right now, Mimi. There you are.
There you are.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I was saying his father is saying that he is now handcuffed to his hospital bed. That just seems overly cruel.
It's insane. I mean, the guy is paralyzed, 7 shots to the back. Where is he going? I think it speaks to this idea that we are not human, right, that we are somehow animals. Now, the reason that I'm not desensitized is because I won't allow myself to be desensitized. I mean, I think as Black Americans, we all live with it every day, but I won't watch these videos over and over again. I'll watch it once and that's it. I don't want it to become normal to see Black men and women gunned down, killed, and tortured in the streets. To me, that makes us animals again. It dehumanizes us. Would they be showing this over and over and over again if they weren't Black bodies that were being tortured and demolished? And, you know, and I suspect not.
I saw the video of his father talking about him being handcuffed to the bed, and that was heartbreaking because it's like you've already ruined our lives. So in addition to my son being paralyzed, we're not going to get up and run out of the hospital. In addition to you ruin our lives, you also are treating us inhumanely, which is another thing. And I know that those politicians out there in that region spoke out against that as well. Like, they didn't even understand it, which is crazy to me. Like, your leadership doesn't even know why you're conducting yourself the way that you're conducting yourself.
Absolutely. And we'll keep an eye on that. And remember, Culture Conversations is live today because of the fast-moving developments in the fight for fair and policing and social justice. You know, guys, an Illinois teenager is charged with first-degree intentional homicide after allegedly killing 2 protesters and wounding another Tuesday night. Before the deadly shooting, 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse talked to a photographer about why he was in Kenosha. Let's take a listen.
What are you doing out here? Obviously, you're armed and you're in front of this business we saw burning last night. So what's up?
So people are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle, because I need to protect myself, obviously, but I also have my med kit.
So let's talk about this. This young man was 17 years old. He was allowed to walk the streets with an AR-15 amongst the police. Yet Blake was shot 7 times in the back because he may or may not have had a knife. The unfairness of these 2 tragedies highlight what many refer to as 2 justice systems. Head.
I think that what we saw with him, I think it was just like, it's insane, first of all, that someone would take it upon themselves. And then I also think that in the eyes of the law, if I do the same thing, I'm looked at as a gang member, or I'm looked at as a vigilante, and he's looked at as someone who's trying to help stop violence. I don't really understand that, because you don't go into a violent place with a gun to stop violence if you are not law enforcement and or otherwise. So to me, that's just a blatant lie, in my opinion.
Dominique?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Head. What is this kid doing? He's 17-year-old. Where are his parents? Why are the police saying thank you for helping us? He's not qualified to be in that role. And I also put some of the onus on President Trump, who, you know, gave an honored spot in the Republican convention to a couple who threatened Black Lives Matter protesters who were peacefully walking through their area. It was a gated community, but they weren't being threatened. And so if I'm that little kid, that 17-year-old who idolizes Trump, I'm going to think, well, maybe I can get on the RNC as a speaker too. Maybe Trump will think I'm really great if I come out here with a gun and threaten some protesters. And that's exactly what he did.
Absolutely. And you said, where were his parents? Well, there are reports that his mother actually drove him to the protest in Wisconsin. So, you know, some are calling for her to be charged too. So let's move on. Let's talk right now. Speaking of the Blake family, there are protests going on right now in Washington, D.C. We're going to take a live look. This is a commemoration of the famous 1963 March on Washington, where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. It's taking place right now. This rally is the result of the protest movement that has taken place nationwide since the police killing of George Floyd. Today's speakers include Reverend Al Sharpton, attorney Benjamin Crump, and family members of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Jacob Blake. Organizers say today is a day of action, a fight for fair policing and criminal justice reform. Had you have reaction to this march?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's amazing to see, especially over the last, 4 or 5 months that we've seen, people are more concerned with protesting the injustices of Black and brown people in this country than catching COVID-19. And I think that says something to you know, the prowess of everybody, because if you look at what's really going on in this country, the pandemic is something that the whole globe has had to deal with. This is something that's more centralized to Americans, and people are out in droves all over the country. As we're looking at it right now in Washington, it's like, this has to stop. You know what I'm saying? I think that for the most part, when we looked at all of these protests that's going on, including the one in Washington, you have to take into account that it's not just people of color. There are people from all walks of life, the LGBTQ community, the the brown community. There are allies out here. Everybody is sick and tired of this, and I think that's an amazing thing.
Right. There's Reverend R. Sharpton right now at the podium. Dominique, looks like he's about to make a speech. He organized this. He actually announced it at the funeral of George Floyd.
He sure did. And I think it's also telling, to DJ Head's point, that this crowd is very young. So it's not necessarily the activists of Sharpton's generation. They are heeding his call. And it is part of an ongoing movement that has been really sparked by the younger generation. The Black Lives Matter, the Fight for 15, young people on campuses fighting for safe spaces on their campuses. All of these, you know, even Me Too, these are younger generations. And now they are joining with this sort of, you know, the elder statespeople, the John Lewises, who they're paying tribute to, the Al Sharptons, who are an earlier generation of activists. And on this anniversary of, you know, the March on Washington, the anniversary of the killing of Emmett Till, and the very same day that, you know, Black Lives Matter is convening a convention about a real Black agenda. There is just a lot of movement, not to mention, you know, what happened in sports this week, just a lot of unprecedented movement towards justice.
Yep. And speaking of sports, you know, the shooting of Jacob Blake comes just 3 months after we saw the video of George Floyd being killed by police. And at that time, many high-profile athletes spoke out against brutality. But this week, they did a little bit more than speak. They refused to play, from the NBA to the WNBA to baseball, even soccer. Can activism by athletes make a difference? What do you say, Head?
I think absolutely it can make a difference because they have their platform is so big. And then when you look at organizations like the NBA, the WNBA, obviously it's majority Black, and we all know that. That's no secret. That's a fact. I think that these athletes, I think it's sad that our generation has to look to athletes for leadership. That just goes to the testament that we have such a lack of leadership in politics at this point, that we're looking to anybody to do something. Somebody help us. You know what I'm saying? And I think that it's been amazing to see what the athletes have been doing with their platforms, just like even in the MLB, other sports have followed suit. And I think that it's very important that we recognize what's happening, because this is an unprecedented time in our history. This has never been a thing. And I think that goes to attest to how severe the issue actually is.
Absolutely. And the WNBA, they're writing Jacob Blake's name, you know, his on their shirts, and they had 7 bullet holes, or 7 holes in the back of their shirts for the 7 times that he was shot, Dominique.
Yes, they did. And these things happen, you know, spontaneously in soccer, in basketball, even a little bit in football. I think it is an historic moment. You know, I differ here a little bit with Head in that I think our leaders are not the ones that are in elected office. I agree with that. There are some, there are a few, but I think right now we've got leadership everywhere, right? In entertainment, on the streets with the young people, you know, creating their own organizations and their own rules. In athletics, I mean, and they are following a proud tradition, whether it be, you know, Tommy Lee and Juan Carlos at the Olympics, raising the Black Power fist, whether it be Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Bill Russell. You know, there is a tradition, but it's just never been this powerful and this strong. And I feel like it has to do with somewhat the fact that this generation of young people, the millennials, the X's, the Y's, and especially Generation Z, are fearless.
Absolutely.
They are not going to wait for justice. They want it now.
They want it exactly right now. Let's go back to Washington really quick. Jacob Sr. is at the platform talking to the crowd.
Your reality is not real. Catering to your delusions is no longer an option. We will not pretend. We will not be your docile slave. We will not be a footstool to oppression. Most of all, we will not dress up this genocide and boo and call it police brutality. We will only pledge allegiance to the truth. Black America, I hold you accountable. You must stand, you must fight, but not with violence and chaos. With self-love. Learn to love yourself, Black people. Unify. Group economics. Black women, you are your brother's keeper. is heavy, but forgive him and heal. His manhood was taken from him a long time ago. Build him up. Black children, read, learn, grow, and live, and question everything. Black men, stand up. Stand up, black men. Educate yourself and protect the black family unit, period.
Wow, what a powerful, powerful speech. Earlier this week, her speech that she gave went viral, and that one was just so eloquently put. What do you think? Give me some reaction on some of what she just said, Dominique.
Well, you know, it's this young generation. I feel like they read. They do read. Whether it's online or in a book, I feel like they are more educated about our history. And so they don't want to start over every time. They want to go from where we are and move forward. And I feel like, you know, her speech, just as the one that went viral when she said, you know, I'm not sad, I'm angry. And, you know, this has to stop. And she's talking about accountability. That to me is the accountability of us as African Americans doing everything in our power, marching, boycotting, protesting, and uplifting one another so that we can move to the next step and stop repeating the same nightmare over and over again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To build on what she said, I think that accountability is important. And I think that the law enforcement community has to also atone for some of that accountability. Like I think that we do our part in taking accountability in the Black and brown community. I do believe that law enforcement and people in government need to take some accountability, because where I'm from, if someone in this organization does something to someone over here, that entire organization is then responsible in that neighborhood for what happened to that person. And I don't see that happening within law enforcement.
Good point, Head.
Yeah.
And you know, it's lost on no one that all of this is happening at the same time as the Republican National Convention, the grand old party pushing a message of law and order. Here's what President Trump said last night.
Make no mistake, if you give power to Joe Biden, the radical left will defund police departments all across America. They will pass federal legislation to reduce law enforcement nationwide. While they enroll their children.
Trump went on to say that no one will be safe in Biden's America and that he stands with the police. So my question to you, Head, do you feel safe in this country right now?
Not at all. But I also think that, you know, hip hop should be worried, because President Trump has proven that he's the freestyle king of America. He gets on television and just rambles about things, doesn't really know what he's talking about. I think he's just the epitome of a bad freestyle artist. I also think that as a Black man in America, I have to pay attention to this because he wields, you know, the power of the free world. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of things that he says are very counterproductive to the progression of our people.
And you know, Dominique, we've seen even, you know, in cases like Breonna Taylor, you know, Black women are not exempt. You know, how do you feel safe in this country?
I don't. And I think that it's also our sons. I mean, of course, I think about Waukesha Wilson. You know, I think about Breonna Taylor. I think about Sandra Bland. The list of Black women is long. And, you know, especially here in Los Angeles, let's face it, where we have more police killings than any other city in the country. You don't have to go far. But I worry about, you know, our children. I worry about my own children. I think that, you know, Head is right. It is about accountability from law enforcement. And what worries me, I also agree, you know, with something Joe Biden said. Trump is trying to bring on more violence now because he feels that if Americans, and by that he means white Americans, are afraid, then they will vote for him. If they're afraid of, you know, Black Lives Matter, if they're afraid of protesters, if they're afraid of Black people, it's the old Southern strategy, then they will vote for him. But the reality is that all the violence that's going on now, all the protesting, all the deaths from COVID-19, all of the wreckage in our economy, all that, the hate crimes and, you know, and the rise of white supremacy, that's Trump's America.
Right.
That's not Biden's America.
Good point, Dominique.
That's a fact. And I also think to touch on what she said as far as the Joe Biden campaign, I think that Democrats are out here continuously pushing politics. And I don't think politics are any longer about policy. I think it's about sensationalism under Trump's America. I think it's about, you know, ratings and galvanizing your base, which is crazy to me. But that's what we've come to.
You know, and that brings us to this. Kamala Harris, the Democratic VP, spoke out about the police shootings of Jacob Blake yesterday.
Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the back in broad daylight in front of his 3 young sons. 7 times in the back in broad daylight in front of his 3 young sons. As Vice President Biden put it, the shots fired at Mr. Blake pierced the soul of our nation. It's sickening to watch. It's all too familiar.
So the Democrats have purposely condemned police shootings of black men. But is that enough? Are words enough to make a difference, Head? That just kind of goes to what you just said. Are they enough?
I think words fall on deaf ears in the oppressed people, because I feel like at this time it's proven. Look at the athletes. Look at the country. All of this separation, all of this division, this divisive rhetoric that the Trump administration has spewed over the last 3.5, 4 years, this is an end result of what's happening. Words are definitely not enough because the people are fed up. And at this point, how many more hands up, don't shoot, peaceful protests do you want before people start doing what you saw previously? So I think that they need to take accountability and understand, like, hey, if this isn't working, we need to try something else. If you're working out every day, all day, and you're not losing weight, common sense would tell you to try something else.
Absolutely. Dominique, your thoughts? Words enough?
Well, I mean, Head's got a great point. I think one of the things I didn't think was great about the Democratic National Convention is that they spent too much time on politics, as Head said, and not enough on policy. Because if you go to Biden's website, he does have specific policy plans. There are policy plans for how to get more money to Black and Latino businesses. There are policy plans for how to deal with, policing. It may not be everything that I would do, but there is a plan there. It's not just rhetoric. I'd like to hear more talk about that. And I also think, that we need to look at what's happening with the solutions that are put forward. Yeah. The Congressional Black Caucus put forth the George Floyd police reform bill, and it passed the House. It is the Republican Senate that is blocking that from going forward. And there are important changes in there, like, getting rid of qualified immunity, banning those chokeholds, the kind of knee to the neck move that killed George Floyd, and, important progress. So until we can move forward with legislative solutions, we're not going to see that real change. And that means we've got to vote for those lawmakers who are willing to move the ball.
And, Dominique, we spoke to Rep. Karen Bass earlier, a couple months ago, actually, on that George Floyd and Policing Act. And you're right, there are so many good things that would help, further this cause along if the Senate would just take it up. We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you both for joining us. We're going to leave you with a live look at Washington, D.C., where the March on Washington is underway.